What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. And UFC 300 has been announced. The main event is Alex Pereira versus Jamahal Hill per Dana White. And I'll be honest, I'm not too shocked with this announcement. The reason I'm not too surprised with this announcement is because, well, a lot of the bigger UFC stars are out of the picture for this fight. And that means Conor McGregor, Adesanya. They've all been ruled out. And it's definitely not the fight that Dana White said would blow us away. Pereira and Hill is just another fight on any other pay-per-view. But I can't be too upset with this announcement. At least it's not Leon versus Bilal for the main event. Sorry, but it's true. So Pereira Hill, while it's not exactly what I wanted for the UFC 300 main event, I'm not going to complain too much. It honestly seems like UFC 300 has been a shit show to put together. I mean, you had, at one point, people were saying that Conor was going to headline. You had people saying Izzy was going to headline. You had people saying DDP was going to headline against Pereira or Izzy. There's just been a lot of names thrown around, and it seems like maybe a lot of negotiations, but ultimately the UFC couldn't get any of those big deals done. And I'm not really sure why. And while I wish we saw McGregor versus Chandler or Izzy versus DDP, I'm not completely against this matchup. Yes, there isn't going to be those pre-fight antics, and the hype for this fight probably won't be as high as those other ones that I mentioned, but on paper, stylistically, this is going to be a really fun matchup. It's also going to be what we get, so there's no point of really complaining about it because it's here now and we have to accept it. But yeah, like I was saying, stylistically, this is a good matchup. You have two strikers going up against each other. You have, of course, Alex Pereira. We know what he's about. We know how good he is on the feet. And then we have Jamahal Hill, who maybe isn't seen to be as good of a striker as Pereira, but Jamahal Hill can crack too, man. He's no joke, and Pereira definitely can't take him as a joke. And to be honest, I'm already getting those vibes from Alex Pereira. I mean, Pereira came out and said that he wants to be the first fighter to headline two back-to-back events. He wants to headline UFC 300 and then make a turnaround and headline UFC 301, which is, of course, being taken place in Brazil. What that tells me also is that it seems like Pereira was probably supposed to be fighting on that UFC 301 card instead, but at the last minute, Dana White called and said, listen, we need you to headline UFC 300, and he accepted, of course. But I do think the initial plan was to have Pereira headline UFC 301 and have someone else obviously headline 300. So that just adds on to the belief that this was a very last-minute main event. This was definitely not their first, second, third, or fourth option even. I don't think this was the plan at all, but it's what they went with. And I hope Pereira isn't overlooking Jamahal Hill with that comment saying he wants to fight at 301 too, because he can't take Jamahal Hill as a joke. Jamahal Hill, in my opinion, I think is going to be a harder fight for him than Yuri Prochazka was because of his style and the way Jamahal likes to box. He's not going to go in and rush into anything like Yuri was kind of doing. So Pereira is going to have to be a lot more careful in this matchup. The bright side to this being the main event is that there's also a great undercard. I mean, the rest of the card is stacked, top to bottom. And I'm hearing a lot of people say that 299 is better than UFC 300, which is just not the case at all. Don't get me wrong, 299 is a great card, but it's not UFC 300. I mean, you have Alex Pereira, Jamahal Hill, Zhang Weili versus Yan Xiaonan, which is an incredible fight. Then you have, of course, Gaethje Holloway for the BMF. That's going to be one of the fights of the year. You have, of course, Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan, another fantastic fight. Amazing. You have Yuri Prochazka, Alexander Rakic, Aljamain Sterling, Calvin Kattar, Cody Garbrandt, Davidson Figueiredo. The list goes on and on, obviously. This card is completely stacked, and I think it will be topped off with still a pretty fun main event. And if we're honest, the only reason there really is any complaints about this matchup is because it is the UFC 300 main event. There's a lot of emphasis put on that little 300 word. And yeah, while I included would have loved to see a much more surprising matchup for the main event, you can't complain too much. This is still going to be a great fight, and it's just the way things worked out. I mean, you have guys like Volkanovski who's not going to be ready. You have Sugar Sean who's not going to be ready. Sean Strickland, who maybe might be ready, but not really. He's not ready. Izzy's not ready. Connor's not ready. So when you take out the biggest stars in the sport and they're not ready for the fight, to be left with a guy like Alex Pereira in the main event facing off against a great contender in Jamahal Hill, I think that's a great alternative and definitely better than Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad. I just wanted to quickly touch on Leon a bit too in this because apparently he was offered 3 different opponents for UFC 300. That wasn't announced as to who those opponents were. Some people were saying Hamzat was an option, Shavkat. They were throwing names around, but even Dana White came out and gave praise to Leon, which you don't see too much from him, and he actually credited him for stepping up and accepting every fight, but ultimately they couldn't get it done, so Leon has to wait. What's next for Leon exactly? It's probably going to be the Bilal fight now, because if they were going to do a Hamzat or a Shavkat fight, that was definitely to put it on UFC 300, but if they're going to use him for just some one-off pay-per-view, then it's probably going to be against Bilal Muhammad. I mean, I could probably even see it being in Brazil at UFC 301 because they may not have a main event for that now, and I don't think they're going to put Pantoja in the main event, to be honest, of a pay-per-view. Just don't see it happening. So I could see that happening for Leon there, or maybe we'll see Leon International Fight Week in July, maybe June, I don't know. But because of that, I'm expecting that we hear an announcement about a potential Leon Edwards fight pretty soon. In terms of how I think this Pereira and Jamahal Hill fight's going to go, I'm not too sure. I don't want to give a prediction yet, but off the top, I am still going to take Alex Pereira because it's going to be a striking match, and how can you ever bet against Alex Pereira in a striking match? So I'm going to go with Pereira, but I do think there's trouble that Jamahal Hill can offer him. So yeah, that's what I think of the UFC 300 main event. Let me know what you guys think down below, though. Are you happy with this matchup? Are you a little annoyed? Did you prefer to see somebody else? I'm always interested to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you all once again for watching another one of these videos. If you enjoyed it, consider liking and subscribing, as that helps me out a ton. And UFC 299 is, of course, right around the corner. I think we have about 2 weeks now. We also have Mexico City card coming up. That's going to be awesome. So stay tuned to more content in the upcoming weeks as we get closer to those events and we talk about them. Thank you once again, and I'll see you in the next one.